Pre-revolutionary Russian cinema was already closely tied to education. A large part of the Russian population was literate at the time, and film was a breakthrough in terms of universal languages. The Russian government realized how valuable film was as a medium. Tsarist leaders developed a committee designated to the creation of films that could be used to rally support for the monarchy in wake of the Bolshevik Revolution. Lenin understood the potential of this new medium, just as well as his predecessors. After the Communist Party took hold of the Russian capital in 1917, Lenin subjugated its equipment and began to commission filmmakers to create propaganda for the Soviet Union. Lenin knew that film could be used as a political tool, but he was also known for his appreciation of film as an art form. But the commissariat of enlightenment ensured that the ethos of the Russian film industry would remain intact. They all agreed that neither the agency nor any other part of the new state had the administrative skill or power to manage a nationwide film market. The commissariat would take a page from the book of the Tsarists, appoint a committee that would be charged to make educational documentaries that promoted national enlightenment. Finally, in 1919, Lenin decided to pass the decree for the complete nationalization of film and authorized for Vladimir Gardin to open the first school under the name the All-Union State Institute of Cinematography. But to get there, we have to go back. It really all starts in the theater. In around 1907, biomechanics was created by Visvold Meyerhold to increase the emotional impact of theater. This method used minimalistic sets with little dialogue. Instead, the actors would reenact a dance-like performance that encapsulated the volatile nature of human emotions. In the words of Meyerhold, given man's power of memory, the existence of two facts in juxtaposition prompts their correlation. No sooner do we recognize this than a composition is born and ideas begin to form. His method would reduce the long, realist form of theater into a theater that relied on motion. But what does this have to do with montage or film even? In the early days of film, when techniques were just developing, the two cultures were deeply intertwined. Many filmmakers then came from a background in theater. One of the most influential names in Russian film, Ewing Bayer, worked as a professional set designer and producer in theater for several years before going on to work with
Kazankov
studios. His understanding of Gestalt psychology would lead to his interest in dissecting films and analyzing how each element could be manipulated. Bauer and
Kazankov
would work together to develop formalism. This means analyzing how the components of a shot, lighting, frame, and set design, could be used to elicit specific emotional responses from audiences. This newfound knowledge would prove to be useful as the need for highly persuasive films was on the rise as whispers of nationalization trickled into the Russian film industry. Russians were experiencing severe shortages in light of the war, and the film industry was no different. There was a nationwide shortage of film stock that would force those who were part of the VGIK to find a way to make their films with the least raw film possible without losing the emotional intensity of the message. Lev Kuleshov would be able to achieve just that by using what he'd learned about composition to inform his technique while expanding on the concept by analyzing how the organization of information can affect an audience. Lev Kuleshov would go on to create the aptly named Kuleshov effect. The Kuleshov effect is basically the Gestalt psychology repackaged to distinguish Kuleshov's idea as specific to film. Kuleshov effect is one of the most influential experiments in film. It would demonstrate that a person presented with two separate images will try to create a narrative to link the two. This experiment would open up a world of opportunities to artists that were willing to follow in his footsteps. Such artists as Sergei Eisenstein. Eisenstein also attended VGIK and was just as obsessed with experimenting with editing as Kuleshov was. The two, however, had very different ideas of how this technique could be used. Kuleshov's interest was assembling shots that link together and expand upon a scene. Sergei was more interested in the juxtaposition of two shots that could collide to create metaphors and double meanings within the film itself. Sergei would build upon Kuleshov's effect by developing 5 methods of montage that would each demonstrate a unique way montage can be used to influence a story. This method of montage is inspired by the meter or beat of a musical score. The editor cuts to the next shot after a predetermined number of frames, no matter what is happening on screen. Here's an example from October, 10 Days That Shocked the World. Eisenstein found that cutting with no real motivation would cause a feeling of unease and chaos to audiences as they would be searching subconsciously for a connection between the cut and the images being shown. Rhythmic montage is one of the more notable methods of montage. Rhythmic montage manipulates time by making compositional decisions as to how long each shot plays before the next one it cuts. This creates the perception that the audience is following along with the dialogue, story, and action. You can see it at work in the ever-famous Odessa step sequence where we follow along with the tragedy of a massacre. This moment that would realistically only last a few seconds is expanded with long, drawn-out shots of pain and death that aggrandize the horror of the massacre. Tonal brings more factors into play. It's defined by how it edits based on the emotional meanings, or tone, of each shot. The filmmaker was experimenting with how cutting certain shots together and combined with the context, images, and the musical accompaniment could create tone. Overtonal montage combines metric, rhythmic, and tonal to create subliminal or overtonal messages. Alfred Hitchcock was known for using this method to create suspense for his audiences. An editor can also employ intellectual montage to create meaning in a film. This method is fairly simple as it presents two separate ideas so the audience can develop their own intellectual interpretation of what is being shown.
It was not long after these methods had been established that other Russian filmmakers would begin experimenting with them in their own films. One particular documentarian, Dziga Vertov, would use these methods to create the montage documentary Man with a Movie Camera. Vertov was a part of a group named the Canucks. This group advocated for the abolishment of films that told stories. Vertov thought that the films were locking into the traditional stage plays. This is somewhat true, as all of the techniques that were popular had their own origins in theater. Vertov's goal with Man with a Movie Camera would be to do away with the invisible editing that only served the storytelling. In 1929, films had an average shot length of 11.2 seconds. Man with a Movie Camera had an ASL of 2.3 seconds. Why does this matter? It helps to understand the impact of the film made at the time. Viewers had never seen anything like it. Mordaunt Hall, the horrified author of the New York Times review, wrote, "The producer Dziga Vertov does not take into consideration the fact that the human eye fixes for a certain time. Rhythmic montage is used in the film to make audiences hyper-aware of the editing, as the film continues to cut at odd moments with no motivation. This fast-paced editing style paired with meta-visuals allows audiences to experience a film that has shot itself, edited itself, and now is conducting itself at an accelerating tempo." Lenin would suffer from a stroke in 1922 and die soon after in 1924 due to poor health. Joseph Stalin would be appointed as his successor despite their political and personal differences. Stalin preferred realism as opposed to naturalism. Naturalism is a theory based on the accurate depiction of detail. Realism, on the other hand, is concerned with relationships, casuality, and the production of informed spectators. This would push Russian cinema into a more literary direction, where things such as synchronized sound and narration would develop to accommodate realism's emphasis on story clarity. Soviet montage theory did not begin to spread to other regions until the latter part of Soviet history. It wasn't until 1928 that British audiences would view one of Eisenstein's films close up. During the montage movement's existence, fewer than 30 films were made in the style. Nevertheless, in France and Germany, these avant-garde films were prestigious and influential. Leftist filmmakers in other countries, especially documentarians like Scottish-born John Grierson and Dutch Joris Ivens, adopted heroic, low-angle framings and dynamic cutting for similar propaganda purposes. Other countries would take longer to begin using these techniques. Americans preferred Stalin's Hollywood-inspired cinema that depicted members of the working class as smiling, happy citizens, none of the tragedy that the previous style of cinema presented. Nevertheless, the writings and editings of these Russian filmmakers will forever be immortalized as a turning point in the timeline of cinema.